Are you struggling to come up with original content week in and week out? Start a podcast. Interview your ideal clients, let them talk about what they care about most, and never run out of content ideas again. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to the B2B Growth Show, a podcast dedicated to helping B2B executives achieve explosive growth. Whether you're looking for techniques and strategies or tools and resources, you've come to the right place. I'm James Carberry.
And I'm Jonathan Green.
Let's get into the show. Welcome back to the B2B Growth Show. We are here today with Kyle Lacy. He's the VP of Marketing at Lessonly. Kyle, how are you doing today?
Doing good. Thanks for having me.
I'm really excited to chat with you today, Kyle. We're going to be talking about really these 4 principles that you learned after being in the venture capital space for 2 years. And I think this is going to be really valuable content for anyone listening to this show. But before we get into that, I'd love to, for our listeners to understand a little bit of context. Tell us a little bit about the venture capital firm and then where you're at now with Lessonly and what you and the team are up to at Lessonly.
Okay. So real fast, I'll give you the brief version. I think that it pertains to all these 4 things we're going to talk about. I started my digital career at ExactTarget and then Salesforce. After our IPO and acquisition, there I ran the content team that produced all the top of funnel content for the company. After integrating the company into Salesforce, I went and worked for a venture capital firm called OpenView in Boston. We specifically invest in B2B software companies at a Series B type stage or growth stage, expansion stage type software companies. And now Lessonly was a portfolio company of OpenView's, and I decided to join to lead marketing for them. And Lessonly is a modern team learning software company, and that basically means is that we produce software that allow leaders as well as HR teams to train employees based off of how they consume content and technology. It's centered around speed, access, and analytics of a learning platform, and how do you tie learning to the bottom line of a company.
I love it. So Kyle, we're going to spend the rest of this conversation talking about these 4 Ps to building sustainable growth in any software company that you really learned in those 2 years that you were with OpenView, and that you're obviously, I'm sure applying to this new role that you find yourself in with Lessonly. This first P is people. Can you talk to us about what this looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to preface this by saying these are in no specific order. I think you could probably put them in order, but this is really based off of doing a ton of diligence on a ton of software companies, and these are what I found were the 4 most important things. So people is as straightforward as possible. Do you have the right people on your team that have aptitude, attitude, and agility? And I think that the hardest thing in the world for a marketing leader to do is actually hire people that have those components, and really hiring people that give a crap about the company. And so when you're hiring for attitude, aptitude, and agility, it's really about, once you get those people, it's how do you organize those people to win in the future, in the digital environment that we exist in as software companies, or even just B2B, because I think B2B is changing just as fast as any consumer-based brand. So in my mind, an organization of people, when you're talking about the modern marketing organization, it's categorized in 3 different business units or silos. You have acquisition, conversion, and brand. And those are the 3 teams. If you're building out a team, you need to focus resources. Acquisition is very much top of the funnel, advertising, marketing ops, field managers, content, search, automation. Conversion is sales enablement, customer success, product marketing, customer retention. And brand is public relations, brand enablement, creative, and events. Now, you can categorize those any way you want. I just think from a leadership perspective, you need 3 different silos to focus on as a modern marketing org, and that's acquisition, conversion, and brand.
Got it. Okay. So really making sure from a people perspective, it's all oriented around the teams that you've built around those 3 silos. Am I understanding that right?
Yeah. And as long as you are hiring the best people for those roles, I think a lot of times marketers tend to hire, our first hire needs to be a leader, especially for like smaller software companies. You need to hire a director if you're VP of marketing for a startup. But really, I think it starts with operations. It starts with automation. It starts with the type of data-driven type marketers that should be in an org. And the reason why I say that, and the reason why you start with acquisition when it comes to building a team at scale, is because those are the people that can truly build processes to scale. So you need, I think way too many times marketers hire everybody outside of everybody on the face of the planet before they hire marketing ops. And I think it's very detrimental to a scalable company, because data and data management and data operations is pivotal to the success of a company that's doubling or tripling every year.
Makes perfect sense. So focusing on building a team in that acquisition part of your org, advertising, marketing ops, field managers, content and search, automation, having that tight and in place so that ultimately when you continue to build that team with people focused on the conversion part of that as well as brand, everything just flows a lot better.
And you as a marketing leader, you should be owning brand to begin with. It's your role to set the vision and the voice and the overall thought leadership of the company as the CMO or VP of marketing.
Yeah.
That's your role. You don't need to hire somebody to do it. You should have, and the acquisition is and that's the point of growth. And then you try to figure out expansion revenue outside of that, which would be the conversion side, which would be product marketing, sales enablement, helping the customer success team, that type of stuff.
Okay, so this next P, Kyle, is process. And this really talks about how does your team operate and optimize for the customer journey. Talk to us about this one.
I don't think that marketers spend enough time on understanding personas and experiences while they're building processes or planning.
Okay.
So within processes, I always talk about obsess over your personas and experiences. And I think there's two types. There's quantitative and qualitative. Quantitative is churn analysis, sales and marketing KPIs, and qualitative is win-loss reviews, customer surveys, and actual product usage to really understand how a buyer is using your product and to be able to sell to a prospect. So when we're talking about processes, it's very much trying to understand the experiences that a prospect or buyer is having and then building tactics around those experiences. I think too many times we have the tendency to start with channels and tactics, and we don't start with what is the end goal from an experiences standpoint that we want people to feel from our brand. And that sounds very mushy, but it's basically, what do you want somebody to do after they download something? What do you want somebody to do after they demo something? Like, a demo is a tactic, but too many times we don't try to understand the process around what happens after the fact or what happens before it. What is somebody experiencing when they go into the demo? Because ultimately, as marketers, and this applies to all 4 Ps, the only thing that makes us relevant is the experience the prospect or customer is having with our brand. That if that isn't working, marketing's irrelevant. You could just hire a sales team to sell all day long, right? Marketing is very much based on the experience, and I think process works into that.
Got it. Okay. So this next P, Kyle, is around programs. Talk to us about this one.
So I'm a firm believer in the best way to put it is programs are, how do you create leverage that uncovers like new sources of revenue growth, whether that's campaigns or different content platforms or different levers you're pulling to increase conversion, that increases marketing production efficiency at scale. And that's like a mouthful of words, of course. But from a programs perspective, it's really much trying to find those niche campaigns and test constantly. Like for us at ExactTarget, we did a ton of content marketing and thought leadership, and I could spend 20 minutes talking about just thought leadership. And we were testing constantly about what was working from a demand gen perspective and what was working from a sales enablement perspective. So when I talk about programs, it's like being obsessed with trying to dive into the things that are working when it comes to programs that are driving revenue, and how do you drive expansion revenue, and how do you drive net new? And that's really what it means around programs.
So what were some of those things? Because I hear people talking about thought leadership a lot, and with you guys having developed so much thought leadership content, what were the things that you guys did that actually mapped those thought leadership pieces or allowed you to see that those thought leadership pieces were mapping to real revenue?
Yeah, of course. So there's a couple things. There's a couple stats you should take into account when you're building thought leadership. Great thought leadership content should contribute to over half of your company's press mentions.
Oh, wow.
Half. At ExactTarget, we were experiencing close to 60 or 70% because what we were doing was we were creating research-driven content. So great content characteristics when it's thought leadership, your content should be pitchable to journalists. You should be able to pitch an ebook and the journalist cares about it. Most of your press messages should be attributed to content campaigns. Every sales deck should incorporate some aspect of your content. Your content should support a 60-minute keynote. Your content should be relevant at every stage of the funnel, not just the top. And your content should be directly tied to closed ACV or another metric that's the business line. That's contributed directly to the business line. So when you're talking about contributing to ACV, you could do that in multiple ways. You could do that from an attribution standpoint, or you can do that to direct source, however you want to measure it. But your thought leadership should be contributing to press, but also see contributing to close one. And we don't have the time to get into all the different types of content, but what we found works extremely well is research driven, whether that's benchmark from your product or it's survey based. Like when we were entering the Japanese market for ExactTarget, we went and surveyed 4,000 Japanese consumers on how they use social email and mobile. And we produced a content piece that was then launched in the market. And that was our calling card to the Japanese market to say, hey, Nike in Japan, we understand the consumer that you're trying to sell to. Come talk to us about email marketing.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Just in looking at some of the things that you sent over my way, we recently had Chris Orlob on our podcast. And I think to illustrate this, to kind of give some examples of what this can tangibly look like, Chris did exactly what you just talked about, and they analyzed, over 25,000 sales calls, and they bundled it up into what they learned. And I see that you referenced this in the deck as well. And so that obviously there was an immense amount of work that went into that piece of content, but Chris was on our podcast. He was on other podcasts.
I talked about it yesterday in a meeting.
Yep. So having that type of content that is rooted in rich data that they've, in their case, they got it from their own product. I think that's such a beautiful example of what you were talking about.
They're the only people that can tell that story.
Yep. Exactly.
And something to keep in mind as a marketer real fast is that you have to look at your customer contracts. If your customer contracts do not allow you to use data anonymously, you're going to be thrown under the bus. That was the problem I've seen in the past, is that an anonymity clause, and I completely butchered that word, right? Was in the contract. So you couldn't use data even if it was anonymous. So you have benchmark reports, and it has to be tied to the product because Chris is going to market that for the next year. And journalists are going to write about it because that's a great story, not we launched a new product. Everybody should focus on us, because guess what? There's 5 other yous, and they all launch products the same day as well.
Yep. No, I completely agree. Kyle, this last P that we're going to talk about is performance. It's about, the systems that you have in place to track and evolve. Can you talk to us about this?
Yeah. So one of my favorite quotes on the face of the planet is from a guy named David Walmsley. He was, at the time when I heard this, he was head of multi-channel for Marks and Spencer. The quote is, we must move from numbers keeping score to numbers that drive better actions. And that's everything, because, I come from an agile training. The whole idea of continuous and rapid improvement is extremely important. So instead of I usually talk about my stack that I use. And for goal and project management, I love Trello.
Yeah.
I love a company called BetterWorks that has waterfall type goal approaches.
Okay.
The one thing I learned at Salesforce was a waterfall type goal orientation where you can track your goal all the way up to the CEO is extremely beneficial if you're planning. And then, of course, Salesforce for CRM and Pardot for automation. But it all ties to one thing, is your data health. And that comes back full circle all the way to people when we talked about hiring data or marketing operations people for your team. Operations should live in marketing. You should be a best friend to the sales team on making sure data is as clean as possible in your CRM, because you cannot make good decisions on unit economics or spend or average ACV or anything if your database is crap. And as you scale, which all of us are doing, your data cleanliness is going to be your biggest issue. And when you hit 15 to 20 million in revenue or 30 million in revenue, and you start to flatline because you can't pull out any type of analysis out of your database, there's a reason for that. So setting up the processes and the programs and the performance metrics beforehand and hiring the right people to do that really, in order to manage those processes, really help you when you start hitting those numbers of growth, which is 20, 30 million, 40 million in revenue.
Got it. So that tends to be the number that you've seen where things really start to...
15, 20.
Got it.
15 or 20 is where, you start, you've hit a repeatability that most people don't hit. And now it's about expanding out into different markets. And if you can't figure out the right processes in order to do that because you didn't keep data right in the first place, it's hard.
Got it. Okay, Kyle, this has been fantastic. I really appreciate you sharing this with everyone listening. If there's somebody that wants to dig deeper on this with you, what's the best way for them to reach out to you? And then also, if they want to learn more about Lessonly and what you and your team are doing over there, how can they connect with Lessonly as well?
Well, I usually say you can Google Lessonly, you can Google my name, Lacy, or you can email me, kyle.lacy@lessonly.com. That's LESSONLY.com, or Twitter, Kyle P. Lacy.
Awesome, Kyle. Well, thank you so much for your time today, man. This has been incredibly helpful content, so I really appreciate your time today.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
If you're a B2B marketer, we want to feature you on sites like the Huffington Post, Social Media Examiner, and Chief Marketer. Every week, we send out a question related to B2B marketing. We use the responses to those questions to fuel the content we write for really popular websites. So head over to sweetfishmedia.com/questions and sign up today.
Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.